You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 618 for January 5th, 2025. And I'm Jaded Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope everyone had a great New Year's. As we bring in 2025, it is going to be a significant year for me personally for reasons I will talk about as we near August.
2025, baby.
I know, it is crazy that we are in the year of our Lord 2025. But we do hope everyone had a great New Year's. And even though we have transitioned into the new year, it is not 2025 for us quite yet. Longtime listeners may know this, but in case you are new, we run on a bit of a cycle that is slightly off kilter to the technical bookends of the year.
Yeah, it's getting closer. I feel like we're getting a little bit closer to that, though. At least in the past, I feel like.
Yeah, slowly but surely we might be inching our way closer to what the actual calendar is.
Yeah, pretty
But
soon
we're
we'll be
off
doing
by
these
a little bit.
episodes on like December 31st or something like that.
Yeah, that would be nice. I think maybe people would appreciate that we're on the actual calendar cycle.
Yeah.
However, we are off by about, a week or two. And the reason we did that to begin with is because you don't always get all of the films that you want to see before doing our award show by
Right.
the end of December.
Right.
Some of these late award season films, they trickle out a little bit slowly. You get them in the first couple of weeks of January. For example, I believe Hard Truths is coming to theaters this weekend.
Yes, that's
Or
true.
it just hit recently. So
Yep, that's
it
a hard
was
truth
one of
right there.
Exactly. That 100%. So that is a great example of why we have slightly altered our calendar, because we want to make room for those. We want to have
We
the
do.
hard truths of the world be
We
a
do.
factor when it comes to our year-end stuff.
Yeah, and at the time when we really tried to schedule it that way, that was back in the day when InSession Film was just getting going. We didn't quite
Yeah.
have the luxury or the luck of getting access to some of these movies as early as we're able to, which makes our jobs so much easier, and we're so thankful for that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's honestly why I think if I look back at some of the dates of our last award shows, some of them occurred even later in January than we're doing with this one. This is actually a little bit earlier by comparison, maybe when you compare to, let's say, the first few years of InSession Film, but I feel like it's become more par for the course in the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah, we typically aim for the middle of the month, or that second weekend of the month is when we typically record.
Right.
Again, to give us time to do the homework, whether it be these late films that are trickling in or simple catch up. Maybe you missed something back in August that you really wanted to see and you wanted to find some time to do it. So we give ourselves a little bit of space. Maybe
Yeah.
as the years progress, we can shrink that time closer to the actual end of the year. Who knows?
Yeah. Pretty soon we'll
but
do
as
these
it
on
is-
Thanksgiving instead.
Yes, as it is, we are still in 2024. We will transition to 2025 after we do the awards show next week. And I guess that is a good transition, because I do want to start the show off this week by running through the lineup of what the next week or so is going to look like. So on this episode, this is episode 618, as I noted before, we are going to be talking about the best scenes of 2024, our top 5. Specifically, we're going to get to that here shortly.
Yeah.
There will be a Chasing the Gold later this week, as the Golden Globes are happening as we speak. They are currently are happening, and there's going to be a Globes Chasing the Gold podcast that will follow.
Yeah, let's make note of that for just a moment for those who are listening. If you thought you heard that correctly, you did. We are skipping the Golden Globe so we can record this episode. So let's just make that known. we are skipping out on that.
Yeah, and I can't speak for Brendan, but for me personally, this was the only opportunity for me to record this episode. My week is
it's
very
fine.
packed.
It's fine. And honestly, I gave that some thought and I realized that what's the better option between the two? Get together and talk about some of our favorite scenes from our favorite films of the year that we're going to remember for a long period of time, or stay up and watch an award show that we're probably going to forget in 24 hours. Like what's the trade-off here?
Yeah, that is very, very fair. So I will not be able to see the Globes and offer any sort of insight into that. I, like Brendan, am very excited to get into our scenes. But Shadon and Erica holding down the fort there.
Absolutely.
They'll have a Chasing the Gold Globes reaction show. And then for our reviews this week, we're going to be talking about Hard Truths, speaking of.
Yep.
And we're also going to get into Nicole Kidman, her latest film, Baby Girl. So those will be our 2 reviews for the week. And there will be, of course, a new women in session later on down the road as well. And then on next week's show, 6/19, that is the big one. That is our year-end show for the films of 2024. It is split into 2 parts. Part 1 is our nominations, our categories for all of the components that go into 2024. So, and that will look like a typical award show with Best Actor and cinematography and animated film and all that sort of stuff. And we include a few unique categories. We do things such as Best Surprise Movie. We do Best Surprise Performance, Best Movie Discovery. So there are a few tweaks to how we do our award show. That is part 1. And then part 2 will be Best Picture, aka our top 10 movies of 2024.
Yep. Which is a show that usually goes on for about 7 hours, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Both parts combined. And I do wonder how that's going to be, because we're going to be joined by an awesome guest that I'm really looking forward to.
I am very much looking forward to it as well. I do want to give my thanks to Ryan and Jay, who have joined us for our awards show the last 5 or 6 years. They were with us for quite a long time doing that, and it was the greatest of time doing that exercise with those 2 gentlemen. However, we are transitioning this year, and we are going to be bringing on our own editor-in-chief, the one and only Dave Giannini. Is going to be joining us for our award show this year, and I'm very, very excited for that as well. That'll be next week, episode 619, again, parts 1 and parts 2. And the following week on episode 620, that will be our most anticipated films of 2025. So that's when we'll transition to the new year. A few weeks into January, we'll be a few weeks late, but eventually we're getting there.
And judging by the slate, 2025 might be a pretty exciting one.
It could be. Yeah, very excited.
We'll have to be curious about it at the very least.
Yes, I very much do agree with that. Okay, so that is the upcoming slate. It's going to be very, very busy. Once again, stay tuned to InSessionFilm.com. And also, I want to note as well, this week, either when this episode drops, it could be today, maybe tomorrow, but very soon, make sure you follow us on social media as well, at InSession Film, because we are going to be dropping the winners for the staff InSession Film Awards. We released the nominations a few weeks ago. They have now been voted on. They have been collected, and we do have the winners ready to go. So we are going to release those on social media in the next week as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that.
I cannot wait to see those results. I don't know what the results are going to be. I was very happy that we got a chance to partake in those nominations in the first place, JD, although it's really funny. I don't know about you, but the submissions that I gave to Dave, they're so different now that I've done even more homework since those were submitted. So it's going to make that award show even funny from his perspective. He's probably going to be calling me out on so many things.
Yeah, I look forward. I haven't even really looked at my nominations since I sent them in to Dave, but I do know they've changed. I do know they've changed. I'd be curious to go back and look to see, because again, I don't know exactly, but I have made updates. I do know that for sure.
I gave him a brief glance, and that's not to say what I submitted to Dave back then was incorrect. That's what it was truthfully at that time.
Then, yeah.
But yeah, I look at him then versus now. It's like, yeah, there's a this is different. This is going to be different.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we begin to transition to this week's show, again, we're going to get to our top 5 scenes of the year. However, before we do, I want to bring up something rather noteworthy. And this is a bit of a surprise to Brendan. But I want everyone here to give Brendan some love, acknowledge his presence here on the show, and take it all in, because Brendan has been fired. Brendan has been fired. Dave, Giannini, and I have collectively decided to fire Brendan because he has some absolutely insane takes about the Count of Monte Cristo. I could not believe this man when he tweeted out what he did this past weekend about
fine. It's fine.
It is incredible. That movie is so good. So good.
I think it's okay. I was so disappointed in it.
Absolutely out of your mind. That film is incredibly epic. It is grand. It's gorgeous. I love the score. I've listened to it nonstop since watching it over the weekend.
Okay, I'll give you that. I think the score is doing all the heavy lifting, because I think everything else is kind of passionless in that one.
Oh my gosh, that is absolutely asinine. That film is gorgeous to look at. The costumes, the production design, it has scale to it. It's
gorgeous to look at because the sets are doing all the work for us. The camera does nothing. That's the thing. It's as far as its cinematography is concerned, I think it's very passive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Brendan and I could not be more different.
We only had to bring this up because JD and I rarely ever disagree about anything on public record, and we have to find an opportunity.
Especially when our disparity is this wide. You could probably argue challengers maybe, but I'd say our gap is even further here.
Yeah, we both still really like challengers, despite me liking it more than you.
Way more.
Yeah, this might be our biggest disparity of the year. Now that I think about it,
it very well could be. Honestly, I think that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I do think we have such a wide gap here. Like the Grand Canyon of gaps.
There might be another disparity that I'm not going to say here. I'll wait to the award show before I get into those details that you and I might have. And it's only based on conversations we've had about a certain subset of films from 2024. There might be a bit of a gap there.
Do you want to mention it here? Because you haven't spoken on the show about it yet, if you have 2 minutes to spare.
2 minutes, it's going to take more than 2 minutes. I started doing some of my own math, and I do at least want to acknowledge something. In the subject of animated films, do I think this is a good year for animated films, 2024? Yes, I do. Is it as good, or is it the best year for animated films since 2014, like you've been saying? Hell no, it's not. And that's really maybe the only other disparity we might be having, because I looked at some of the other animated films from this particular decade. If I were to do my top 10 favorite animated films from this decade, so far, nothing from this year makes it.
Okay. Yeah, that is a pretty hot take. Yeah. I think that's quite sizzling.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it yet, only because I didn't want to transition this conversation away from the Count of Monte Cristo, which was a lot of fun already.
Gotcha. Well, I wasn't necessarily thinking that's the route you were going to go. I thought you were going to bring up Nosferatu because you haven't had a chance to.
Oh, no.
Give your thoughts on
Nosferatu
I got you.
No, good.
So
movie.
That is a
Good
surprise.
movie.
I did not really have much of a rebuttal here in the moment because I did not expect you to bring that up.
Hey, you surprised me. I guess I got to surprise you as well. I guess we're a little bit even here.
I think that's a crazy take as well. Yeah, no, I think that is up there with Monte Cristo as.
Well, I was thinking about this. Movies like Luca, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Robot Dreams, The Boy and the Heron. I had a list. Yeah. All better than anything from this year, if you ask me.
I would take The Wild Robot over, at the very least, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I don't even think that might have cracked my top 20. If it did, it was certainly on the low end, but
Okay.
it's a good movie. It's a very good movie. I don't think it's nearly as good as The Wild Robot. Those others you mentioned are also really, really great. I haven't done that exercise. I don't know if
yeah.
where The Wild Robot fits in that for me. It might be fourth among those others that you listed, but we're talking about really great company. And when I talk about the year in its entirety, that includes all of the other films. And while those films you listed are great, they're not accompanied with other what I would consider to be really great animated films to nearly the caliber of what we got this year.
Okay, so
with Flow and Memoirs of a Snail. Like, I feel like those two films and how they accompany The Wild Robot. Transformers 1 is in that conversation for me as well.
Yeah.
I think that is honestly one of the more overlooked animated films of the decade so far. And I think Inside Out 2 deserves all of the praise that it has warranted as well. So like those five as a collective, maybe there isn't a film in that group that trumps The Boy and the Heron, or maybe even Luca. I will certainly give you that. But as a collective, nothing from this decade comes even close to those five. Not even close.
2023, Boy and the Heron, Across the Spider-Verse, Robot Dreams, Susan May, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I like those
and
five
again,
more.
yeah, like that's that.
2022, Marcel the
those
Shoes
those
On,
first
Turning
four
Red.
is a good crop. The first four is a good crop for sure.
2022, Marcel, Turning Red, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Apollo 10.5. I like those four than anything from this year.
Yeah, see, like I'm pretty lukewarm on two of those that you mentioned for that year. Like that's a clear downgrade to me. Not even close.
I don't think so. I think
2023, I will give you that one is close.
Yeah,
that one is close.
I
don't think it quite has the depth, but it's certainly close, and it might have the highest of highs with The Boy and the Heron for sure. And Spider-Verse is really great. I don't want to discount Spider-Verse, but I don't think The Wild Robot and Flow, which would be my top two from this year, if I am to put them into a Royal Rumble with those two, I don't think the disparity is all that different. It's not that wide for me.
Yeah, it's pretty wide for me. Luca, Boy and the Heron, Wolf Walkers, Across the Spider-Verse, Marcel, Robot Dreams, Pinocchio, Turning Red, even Apollo 10.5. I like all those movies.
You would
better
take
than
Turning Red over The Wild Robot?
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Now, I've seen The Wild Robot 3 times now. And I don't even think it's close. It is not even close. It is,
and I'm saying this as someone that
for me.
I'm saying this as someone that really likes The Wild Robot. That was a 4 out of 5 for Letterboxd for me.
Yeah, I mean, and I like Turning Red as well. I think I gave that 3.5, something like that. I like the film. I do really like it. I don't think it's nearly like elite top end though.
I like it more than you. I certainly like it more than you.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I think this has been. I think last year certainly comes the closest, but I don't know if the five I would argue is the 5 of the year. I don't know if there's anything that comes close to 2014. Now, I don't think anything will ever overtake 2014.
Oh no, 2014 is the 2007 for animated movies.
Yeah, that will never be trumped. At least I cannot foresee that ever happening.
No, I can't either.
But I do think this year is quite easily the best since then.
Yeah, I'm not quite
although
there.
2023
I think it's a good year.
certainly
I think
comes
it's a good.
close.
I think it's a good year. But yeah, I was definitely more passionate about these other 5 collective nominees from previous years as I when compared to something like 2024.
Okay.
So nice
I disagree.
tangent.
I wholly disagree there too. So
nice tangent away from me thinking
anyway,
The Count of Monte Cristo was just okay.
is awesome. That film is great, and when it becomes available to everyone, please go check it out. It is really awesome. It's so good. It's a lot of fun.
It's
It's long though.
It is long. It is long. And I'll be honest, the length was not the issue for me. It really just came down to the filmmaking and some of the performances.
It was a breeze. It went by for me. I had no idea that 3 hours went by and the movie was over. Like I was completely immersed. I thought it was so good. Yeah. I mean, the only knock I think it has is its familiarity. which isn't really a fault of the film unless you
No,
want
it
to
comes with- it
criticize
comes
it
with the
for just
territory.
tackling that material again.
It comes with the territory. I mean, that story has been done many times before. Even The Mask of Zorro is technically an adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo in some ways.
I mean,
it's such a
so-
similar blueprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is very traditionally told, so it doesn't come with many surprises in that regard. But as far as adapting the material and using the form, like the medium, to retell the story, I think that's about as good as an adaptation can get. I mean, it is sweeping, it's grand, it's large, it's luxurious. It's fantastic. I loved it.
Kind of
every
felt like
second
felt like an obligation to me.
Yeah, I could not agree more or disagree more.
Disagree
could not
more,
disagree
yeah.
more. Yeah, I could not disagree with that more. At any
well, that was
rate,
fun.
I
That
just
was fun,
wanted to bring
JD.
that up. Yeah. Also, Brendan, I wanted to give you some space to talk about Nosferatu going back to 10 minits ago, but we have now run out of time. So
No, I think
lost
we
the
could save that
opportunity.
maybe for bonus content or something like that.
okay. Well, there you go. All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee. We love coffee. We need it. I feel like I've had at least 4 cups today. 4 cups of coffee. I'm juiced. I'm feeling juiced. I'm ready.
You are you go to the Lord of Coffee. You praise the Church of Coffee. And even when I was feeling sick with the flu, I couldn't stop drinking coffee. I needed it. I needed it.
It's the best. And look, if you're going to drink coffee, you might as well drink good coffee. Why do you want garbage coffee that tastes like it came off of someone's boot?
I know.
You don't need it.
I say that as someone who, like I said, I was sick with the flu for the past week. And when you're sick like that, coffee's not really something you want because it's diuretic. It dehydrates you. But coffee call, given its natural ingredients, the organic way that it's made, it didn't affect me in that way. Like it actually, it sat well. It sat well with me.
It does sit very well. Yeah, because we're talking about specialty grade coffee.
Yeah.
And what that means is that Coffee Cult is using the best coffee beans on the planet. They have a very distinct process that eliminates a lot of those like bad beans or like the bad stuff you don't want that comes in a bag of specialty grade. They filter everything out. They make sure every bean is pristine. It is perfect. And then they roast it very specifically as well to make sure you get all of those organic natural flavors. So if you want a coffee that has notes of chocolate and brown sugar and cinnamon, you can get that. Or if you want something fruit forward that has berries and like floral flavors, you can get that as well. They have all of that. Coffeecult.com. That's coffee with the K, cult with the K. Coffeecult.com. They have all kinds of great coffees up there. And at checkout, use our code ISF24. That will probably update soon. But as it stands right now, ISF24, and you'll get 15% off your order there.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing coffee. You want to go check it out. Again, that's coffeecult.com, and we thank them for their support. All right, Brendan, InSession Film swag. We got to talk
we
about
love it. We love it. We love our shirts. I love the shirts you come up with, man. It's great stuff. What you're wearing right there, Lester Bangs, I love it.
Yep, I got some Lester Bangs going on right now that you absolutely adore. We have all kinds of fun things up there at the InSession Film store. It's a great way to support us. You get some awesome T-shirts or mugs, stickers, whatever it is that you want. We have all kinds of designs. You can go to InSessionFilm.com/store or go directly to TeePublic. That's where we source them from. TeePublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. And if you go there, you'll see all of the designs that we have. We have a couple of new designs in addition to Chasing the Gold. We have our regular logo T-shirts. We have Women in Session gear as well. It's the award season. I should have maybe I'll wear that to next week's show just for the irony of it all.
I think you
Stop
need
turning
to
art into sports.
Yeah.
I just got
give yourself
that
a
one as
nice
well.
button up that just showcases it like Superman. Yeah.
Exactly. But I have to do that as well. We got an Arrival shirt. We got a La La Land Moonlight shirt up there. Midnight Special. We got all kinds of fun things up there. Go to, again, InSessionFilm.com/store or directly at TeePublic. TeePublic.com/store/InSessionFilm. And get your InSession Film gear. It really helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
And if you go directly to TeePublic, throughout the year, they often have a lot of different deals going on. So
Oh,
you can
absolutely.
always get a good deal on one of the t-shirts going on there. So go check that out. For those that do get your InSession Film shirt, when you get it, make sure you take a picture, send it to us. We always love to share those and know who is supporting us in that way.
Yeah.
So if you do that, we really do appreciate it, and we thank everyone's support. All right, we are going to now transition into the best scenes of the year. Perhaps we will find some agreement here. Who knows? Unless
sure we
Brendan
will.
just wants to continue to be the contrarian of the cinephile sphere. Who knows?
My top
I
5
am very
scenes
much
of
looking forward to that, though.
my top 5 scenes of the year will be every musical number from a complete unknown.
Yeah. Which, I guess if we're going off the discourse, you'll certainly be far from a contrarian there. I think you might be pandering to a certain segment at the very least, but
Spoiler alert, nothing from a
not-
complete unknown
yeah.
makes my list.
not on my list either. Not on my list either. All right. Well, let's get into it. Brendan and I did not really discuss this much before hopping on here, but he did suggest that his criteria might be a little bit different this year. So I want to give you the floor before getting into this. I do not really have much criteria. I have kept this pretty much the same as I've always done.
Yeah.
I simply picked what I think is the 5 best scenes of the year. It really isn't more than that. I guess if I have a criteria, I did not select more than one scene per film. Although there's certainly several scenes from my favorite films of the year I could have considered. But I did keep it to one scene per film for the 5. So that's about as far as my criteria went. Outside of that, I just kept it to, the best, what I think is the best. It was pretty black and white for me.
Yeah, I gotcha. There is one pick in my 5 that is a little bit of a cheat. I will admit that. And I'll see your reaction if you decide to allow it when we get to that point. But as far as my criteria, I keep going back and forth on this. I think it's funny, first off, that pretty much every time that I've done one of these lists, a best scenes of the year list, I always have a different criteria every single year. I feel like I do it differently every single time. And there was a criteria that I was toying around with for this particular set, but I think I'm going to back away from it. I didn't tell you what this was, JD, but what I was thinking about potentially doing was almost treating this like a draft of sorts. So if you were to pick a scene that I also had in my top 5, then I wasn't allowed to pick it. That's what I was thinking about potentially doing, because I was looking at my initial 5 that I was going to utilize as maybe a true list. And my thoughts were, I think JD might have that one. Ooh, JD might have that one too. Oh, JD might have that one. But then I realized if we were to do this kind of draft style, it really only works if both people partake in that criteria, right?
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't really work if I do it only. So I've decided to say, screw it. My criteria is the same as yours. Yeah, my criteria is the same as yours. Maybe that might be a fun exercise next time around. Maybe we can treat it like a draft. If there's ever one of those years where we think our thoughts are going to be very much in lockstep, maybe we can think about doing that. And we're probably going to have at least 1 or 2 crossover here. I'm willing to predict that.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't work if only one person plays that game. So I'm treating it the same way as you, honestly.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, honestly, looking back or trying to think back anyway, I don't know this objectively speaking, but I feel like we come into this, and obviously we're doing a top 5, so we're talking about 10 different picks.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't crossed over too often. Now, last year we did have the same number 1 with Oppenheimer, but that felt obvious as the scene of the year.
Yeah.
And maybe there are a few other examples, but I feel like, and again, this is just a gut feeling. I could be totally off here. I'd have to go back to the website and look at the archives, but I feel like doing that process organically, we've done a fairly good job of avoiding too much crossover.
We're going to cover the gamut fairly well, I think, with our top 5s, but I'm looking at my list now. There are 2 that I think are on your list. I'll just simply say that.
I could, looking at mine, there are at least 2. There's one that will for sure. I know there's one that we're going to cross over on. At least one for sure. As far as a potential second one, I could see that happening as well. So I'm curious. I'm curious where this lands. I'm very, very excited. Are you ready to dive in?
Let's go for it.
All right, let's get into it. The best scenes of 2024, our top 5. We're kicking it off. Brendan, what is your number 5 scene of 2024?
My number 5 comes from The First Omen. It's the what I'm dubbing the "what's not real" scene,
Gotcha.
which
Okay.
It takes a lot to scare me these days. It really does. And this particular moment made my blood run so cold, I began quivering in the theater. And just for that simple reaction, I knew I had to consider it as one of the best moments of the year. Primarily because I'm having a reaction like this to a very artful horror film that also happens to be a Disney-owned horror prequel IP kind of thing. I did not expect that type of reaction for something that was this artistic and this effective. I think a lot of it is also Nell Tiger Free's committed performance, especially in that moment. And for those listening, if you haven't seen the film, for a little bit of context, it's a particular scare that takes place in a dark room, a dark kind of cell of sorts. And something in the corner is observing, lingering. You don't really know what it is, but it slowly reveals itself. It is not a jump scare. It's sort of a bit of a twist on some of those moments at the end of Hereditary, where you see Toni Collette sort of in the corner of the room, and it takes like almost 15 seconds to realize, oh, that's where she is. It's kind of a neat play on that, and the way that this filmmaker, Arkasha Stevenson, plays with dread and tension is very new. And for a commercial film like this, I found that genuinely surprising and genuinely effective. So yeah, that moment stayed with me, made the hairs in the back of my neck really stand up.
Yeah, that's a really great film. It still holds up as one of the best surprises of 2024 because, as you noted, it comes in as a prequel to an IP that we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And it's this incredibly artfully made movie, and I absolutely adored it as well. I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't seen the film since it came to theaters, and that was, early on in the year, April, perhaps March or April.
That was early. Yeah. That was around the same time as Immaculate.
Yes. It was like the week or two.
It was
like
back to
after.
back.
Yeah.
Perfect double feature.
It was. And I do remember it being a really fun conversation in that regard. It is a visceral film. I was very much affected by it as well. But I'm affected by a lot when it comes to horror. So,
you are, but you've at least seen enough to know when a horror movie is doing something new with those scare tactics. Yeah. And I feel like
absolutely.
you were able to recognize it here as well.
Yeah, I thought the film did a really great job of fusing its craft in a way that isn't reliant on cheap thrill, and it weaves its thematic underbelly into those scares in a really, really palpable way that I really enjoyed as well. So yeah, that is a really, really great pick there. All right. I'm going to set up my number 5 here with a question. Do you have it in you to make it epic?
Yeah, we have crossover.
Right. Here we go.
Right off the bat. This is my number. This is my number 2.
Number 2. All right. So this is
almost
number 2.
Almost my number 1. In fact, I gave the film a rewatch. Yeah. It might actually be my number 1 if I were to really think about it harder, but I have it at number 2 right now.
I will say this is an incredible, incredible moment. I love this movie so much. Chris Hemsworth, it is astounding to me. And I cannot say that with more of a bitter disappointment that he is not in the awards conversation this year. It is crazy. It is nothing short of crazy that he is not in the awards conversation. He is so good in this film.
The Mentis.
And he's at his very best in this moment. It's obviously near the end. I'm talking about that moment between Furiosa and Hemsworth there in the desert where they're having some verbal sparring. The writing is incredible. It is crackling. It's diverting. It's poetic. And I love how it's this scene centered around revenge, but it's also Furiosa desperately seeking peace and justice. And it gets to this moment where, as Furiosa is seeking that justice, you get Dementis saying, "You can do me fast, you can do me slow, but you'll never come close to getting what you want," which is a great line of dialogue that Hemsworth delivers impeccably. And it's followed by this scene where Furiosa cuts off the teddy bear that is strapped to Dementis, which is incredibly symbolic of her childhood. And that then leads to Dementis saying, the question is, do you have it in you to make it epic? And it cuts to the narration and myth telling that the film had built itself around. And I just, what I love about this film is it clearly builds itself as a parable. And broadly speaking, the film sees Furiosa throughout a lot of it sprawling in the desert, being tempted by the devil, specifically being tempted to get revenge on the devil, if you will, in Dementis. And by the end, like all great parables, the film is evoking interpretation and myth, crystallizing in a shot that's clearly invoking the Tree of Life, cementing further Furiosa's transition from seeking revenge to this hope-filled redemption. And that, to me, is what gives so much power to that moment in the desert as she faces off with Dementis. Again, when he asks her, do you have it in you to make it epic? It's a question that, in the context of the film, is remarkably powerful because we know what happens in Mad Max Fury Road. We know how epic it is. And secondly, on a symbolic level, the way she turns her rage into redemption is emotionally monumental and worthy of becoming myth. It is absolutely brilliant storytelling from George Miller. Absolutely brilliant. I loved it. Love that film. Love this scene. My number 5.
It's almost like a producer went to him and said, you need a line of dialogue in this movie that we can use solely for the trailer. And then he somehow came up with something that actually did have more purpose than just that, because that was such a talking point with the trailer, if you remember the marketing for the film. And then it has this new context that actually reinvigorates the movie in such an interesting way. The movie, and especially this ending, it's a very surprisingly artful take on vengeance that I can't really recall seeing as of late, or even really ever. Certainly has more in common with movies like Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, about how vengeance corrupts the soul. And I think what's interesting is that it asks this really interesting question, not the literal question about what it means to make it epic, but how does one actually seek vengeance without losing themselves along the way? And I feel like most movies explore that question as very black and white. You either kill your target or you forgive them. Furiosa does both, but also neither, which is really interesting. I didn't expect the film to be this psychological on its tale of vengeance, its topics of vengeance. And I think that's what I love
about it's myth telling. Because in the film very purposefully fuses ambiguity into it, right? Especially as that whole scene crystallizes, because the narrator tells us, well, maybe she shot him and killed him.
Yeah.
Maybe she dragged him throughout the desert, and that's how he died. And then again, you bring up a third option that the narrator hears directly from Furiosa herself. Do we know that any of these happened? We don't. We have no idea, but that's how myth is born. And when you circle that around Furiosa and what she represents, it's just so incredibly vibrant. Like that, the level of storytelling, it like George Miller does not get enough credit as a director for this. He certainly doesn't get enough credit as a writer for this.
I was just going to say, I don't know if this is a hot take. It might not be, but it might seem like a hot take. Whether you like Fury Road better than Furiosa or not is beside the point. I think Furiosa is the better written film of the two, because it actually does have more of that kind of script writing backbone to get us to that point, where Fury Road isn't really about that. So it's not really a way to compare them. They're very different agendas. But there's a lot to be said about George Miller and his script writing here for Furiosa and Mad Max Saga that I think is absolutely amazing.
I completely agree. I think I would argue that Mad Max is the better directed film because it technically is more practical and it is seen on the screen for sure.
Yeah,
But there's
absolutely.
also much more bombastic action to that film,
Mhm.
where this has less action and more poetry. It is more about the parable and the myth telling. So the writing is more vital here than the action sequences, which are still great.
They're
Which are
still great, yeah.
really, really great.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the writing and the performances here are perhaps a little bit more at the nucleus than what you get with Fury Road. But that's what makes the two of them just impeccable complementary films.
They're a great yin and yang, because if this is like some heavy metal franchise, then Furiosa is the epic power ballad. That's how I keep describing it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So good. All right.
Great
so
movie.
we cross over. That is Brendan's number 2 and my number 5. So we're now to our number 4.
All right, number 4. Let's see if this is also on your list. I think this will also come pretty close, if not in your top 5. My number 4 is from Luca Guadagnino's Queer. It's the Come As You Are Nirvana Needle Drop.
Okay. This is not in my top 5, but it's probably number 7 on my list.
So pretty close. Pretty close. All right. This needle drop made my heart leap out of my chest. I just did not expect this. Nor when I heard it, did I expect it to work this well, because this is something we talked about when we reviewed the film with Eric Anderson over at Awards Watch. It's a needle drop that really fits the theme of the movie very well. Kind of this idea of closeted queerness, if you want to put some type of label on it, especially knowing that Kurt Cobain from Nirvana sort of had this, secret queerness in him that people have argued about. So I think it has a really interesting thematic purpose by bringing Nirvana almost into this narrative. So it fits the theme, but it's also a song that post dates the events of this movie by like 20 years or so. Means it should not work. This absolutely should not work. And it feels like this hypnotic music video placed within a film that doesn't feel out of place. And I think the synergy of how that all works and comes together in totality, I think is very effective. So as far as a needle drop is concerned, I wanted to at least represent something musically on this list. And I think this is the one that most comes to mind and best represents that for sure. So yeah, Come As You Are from Queer, one of the best scenes of the year.
No, I completely agree. I love this. As I noted, this is probably number 7 on my list. And I completely agree with you. This is exactly why, again, circling back to the InSession Film Awards, that we alter the song category. It is not best original song. It is best use of song, because an original song in the context of a film can be absolutely incredible. In fact, I'm going to talk about one here in just a little bit.
Okay.
However, pre-existing music, needle drops, and how they're used in movies is also electrifying and can elevate the artistry we see on screen. And this is quintessentially that. Quintessentially that. The song is obviously not original. Will it now forever be associated with this film in that moment? You better believe it. You certainly better believe it. At least those that are Luca Guadagnino fans and fans of this movie.
Sure.
Because it is stunning. It is stunning the way it overlays that whole sequence as he's walking through the redolent streets of Mexico City. It is unbelievable. And I do love that about Guadagnino's direction here and how brazen and experimental he is. It certainly comes through in that scene. I completely agree. Love that moment.
So good. So good.
Fantastic. All right. My number 4, I am going to Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow. It is the birthday party bathroom scene that we see at the end of that film.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you talk about an incredible chilling moment in this film. Owen, the central character of that film, his gender dysphoria is riddled with this deep pathos that comes through vividly in the film. I know Schoenbrunn doesn't see the film as a cautionary tale, but the horror of living out a facade as a shell of yourself and denying your true identity is incredibly haunting in that film. It's hard not to see it as some sort of cautionary tale, especially when in those final moments, it just seems as if Owen had lived most of his life as a spectator and was desperate for some kind of catharsis. There is an aching despondency in him that is so devastating to watch. He can't even breathe at times. He's crushed by the weight of not being who they truly are, to the point where it looks like he can barely move, which leads to a panic attack as the birthday party is unfolding that is palpably guttural and heartbreaking. He's almost literally suffocating from his anxiousness and lostness. And the reveal of a truth in the bathroom that soon follows is one of the best uses of symbolism I've seen in a long, long time. I do understand why Sean Brunt, again, doesn't see this as a cautionary tale, because everyone's journey is very different.
Sure.
And it is often filled with the horror that is provoked in this film. And that comes through what we see on screen. And again, it's a combination of writing, it is the direction and performance. One of the most surprising performances of the year as well.
Where did Justice Smith come from?
Do not know where that performance
I don't know where
came
this
from,
performance came from the actor that was also in Jurassic World.
Yeah, it's absolutely harrowing to see how all of that unfolds. But the idea of literally splitting yourself up to look inside, something that the character had avoided doing up until that point, it's incredible. I mean, there's certainly a somber quality to it that, again, is so vividly palpable, but it's so good. And for me, quite easily one of the best scenes of the year. It's my number 4 here.
You called it guttural, which I think is the best description for it. And in my number 5 pick, I talked about The First Omen, probably the best scare of the year as far as I'm concerned. But this scene from I Saw the TV Glow might be the best moment of actual horror of the year. Just given the way, like this scene alone is where I think calling I Saw the TV Glow a horror film is a very apt description, because it's really about true horror, not movie horror, if that makes sense. There's something really deep down that Owen is masking that really breaks him down in a way that is truly horrific, and I think it really is effective. This is a great honorable mention for me for sure.
Okay. All right. So number 4, that was our number 4 picks, number 4 scenes. On to number 3. What do you got at number 3?
Number 3. This is the one where I have 2 scenes from the same movie as kind of a cheat, and I'm curious if you're going to allow it.
Okay.
If you don't, then I'll just limit it to the final scene.
Okay.
But I have the bookends, the opening and closing of Victor Arice's Close Your Eyes.
Oh boy. You know what? I think I can allow it because they are deeply connected, deeply connected, and not just in a symbolic, emotional way, but almost in a very literal way. They're connected as well.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly what I was
thinking. It is a bit of a cheat, but I do see where you're coming from, and I don't hate that.
Yeah, and that's where I'm coming from as far as the symbolic and literal connection happening between both of these scenes simultaneously. I love how the film opens as kind of a fake out in some ways. You go into this movie not knowing what to expect. The film actually very effectively tricks you into thinking you're watching some movie taking place in the 1940s involving a dying man looking for his long lost daughter. Only to then realize that this is a film within a film and serves as the subject of our main character's final film before his actor mysteriously disappeared, which then leads to the film's actual conclusion, which brings people together in a theater to actually see the ending of this film that this director made for very specific reasons that I won't get into for plot points. But really gets into these powerful notions on cinema and memory and how congruently intertwined that they are. So both of these scenes together, I think, create this merriment of what memory means and how they literally connect in a way where actually made me want to see this fake film. This fake film actually looked really good.
It seriously looks compelling, yeah.
It does. I was compelled. The opening 20 minutes, I was so compelled, and then I realized, wait, this is not a real movie. Okay, now this is the movie. wow, I'm glued. I am glued to this thing. I am so fascinated by what Victor Reese is doing here. And just given the way it concludes thematically and how it ties back to that, I think is very effective. So I really do think both of them work so congruently that I couldn't really separate them, even though I do think that revelation of how they work together really is in that final scene, which is absolutely guttural. But yeah, it's a very beautiful film. I'm glad I got the chance to watch it very close to this award show season.
No, I am wholly with you. That opening scene immerses you immediately into this film. It is a great hook. It's not Monte Cristo good, but it's still very good. Just kidding. I'm just poking fun whenever I can.
Oh yes, because we know they're apples to apples, right?
Exactly. They're the same movie, basically.
They're the exact same movie.
No, I do agree with Brendan. No, Close Your Eyes is one of those movies. And I mentioned this, I believe, on last week's show, right? Because it's one of the last films I saw in terms of doing homework leading to this episode that I wish I had more time to wrestle with, because it did hit me in such a strong way that when it comes to the awards show next week, maybe even this episode, I might look back in another 5 and 10 years. And if I don't include it enough in any capacity, whatever that looks like, I might look back at this episode or our award show next week with all tons of regret. I'm like, why didn't I think about that film more?
It'll be like our Boyhood from 2014,
like a little
right?
bit of Boyhood. Yeah, because I honestly don't know where it fits in, but it did hit me in such a big way, and I do agree with you. It is this powerful examination on cinema and memory and how the process of making art leaves you broken. It's a great setup at the beginning of the film for sure, but how this film crystallizes with those final scenes, it is immensely rewarding. It's so good.
I was surprisingly on the edge of my seat for a movie like this that's very methodical and really is just a bunch of people in rooms talking in emotional soliloquies in many ways. This is also a great mystery movie at its core. It also functions as a great mystery as well.
Oh, I agree. No, it really does function wonderfully as a great mystery. I mean, the writing of that film is honestly its biggest strength, I think, because there is so much dialogue. There's a lot of back and forth. And while at its core, it's about these characters trying to find some sort of truth, an emotional truth, there is a surface level mystery truth that they're trying to seek as well. And like how those things coalesce is just, it's really, really good. Really, really good.
Great movie. Great movie.
Great movie. All right, my number 3. I'm going with a scene that reminds you of why you fell in love with cinema. It is why this medium is so moving and beautiful to us, and the power that film, that art has in our lives. That's what this scene represents. It's a moment that invokes pure, unbridled emotion. It's why we go to the movies. It's basically everything Nicole Kidman talks about in that AMC ad that we all love so much. I am going with the final scene to All We Imagine as Light as my number 3.
Oh man, I thought you were going in a more jokey direction. I thought you were going to pick something from like, I don't know, Piece by Piece or something.
I'm going with the entirety of Monte Cristo as my number 3.
Oh, there you go. There you go. But anyway, okay, the final sequence is from All We Imagine Is Light, which is almost like, this is almost like 3 individual scenes strung together to make this like emotional catharsis in many ways.
In a lot of ways it is. So you get to this final scene at the end where our 3 central characters, they're sitting under the lights of this bar. They're also under the ethereal stars in the night sky, sharing a moment of togetherness away from the city. And it's one of the most emotionally stirring moments of the year. It is symbolically potent, but on a character level, seeing the 3 of them find a moment of peace and joy even if it's just for a brief moment. We don't really know. There is some ambiguity to that, which I do love about the film. But seeing them in this moment leaves you on such a massive high as the credits begin to roll. And a lot of it is, to your point, Brendan, how the film weaves these three characters together through the cipher of its themes of loneliness. It's not always subtle, especially as you get to the end of the film, where we find them at this seaside village, and they're away from the oasis of the manufactured and artificiality that comes with the city. They're relishing in the natural graces of the wind and the rain, or the waves, of the ocean, and the light of the stars. It is extremely peaceful. The conversation, the honesty that they share with each other in those final moments, it is breathtaking. It is absolutely breathtaking. It is one of my very favorite closing scenes of the year. And you want to talk about score complementing the emotional truth of a scene.
Oh, this is the score track of the year.
It is absolutely one of the score tracks of the year. There's no doubt about it, from Top Shi. And I believe the track is just called Imagined Light. It is stunning. It is stunning. I have listened to it almost nonstop since I first saw the film, or at least since it became available on Spotify, this track anyway. And each and every time I find myself wanting to stand up if I'm sitting down, or if I am standing up, running around with, again, this unbridled enthusiasm. This moment is why I love art. It is why I go to the movies. I love these characters. And the way this film crystallizes those characters, it brings that love out in such a real, vivid way that makes you want to stand up and cheer as the credits begin to roll. The music and how it just complements that feeling. It is breathtaking. The filmmaking is breathtaking in this moment. It really is a stunner. And also, I want to shout out the cinematography there too, because the final frame, it's a still camera, and it's a wide shot that lingers for what feels like 2 minutes. I don't know how long it is, but it feels like it's there for a while.
The layering of everything there,
again, and like on the bottom half of the frame, you have the bar and the neon lights, which pop because all of this takes place at night. But on the top half of the frame, you do get the sky lit up with the stars as well, and you hear the waves of the ocean coming in, and they're just you see them sitting there at the bar, engaging in each other's presence and the love they have for each other. And it is astounding. It is absolutely astounding. It is radiant. I absolutely love it. Again, it reminds me of why I fell in love with cinema to begin with. It's that stirring of a moment. I absolutely love it.
It is currently my number 6, so it just misses my top 5. And the only reason why I didn't include it in my top 5 was because as I was looking at my actual top 5, I thought to myself, okay, I want to have as much variety as possible. Which one of these is JD most likely going to have in his top 5? And of course, it was going to be this one. But needless to say, I absolutely agree with you. I think the way that those final sequences between each of these individual 3 characters are strung together to create what is an emotional release for all 3 of them, whether it be this final moment in the doctor's office involving a drowning man, the cave sequence, and how that all crystallizes as well. It's perfect cinematic synergy. It's just so effective in how well made that it is. And I do agree with you. One of the best films of the year.
Yeah. So good. All right. So that was my number 3. Brendan has already revealed his number 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we can.
Earlier, it was Furiosa.
Yeah. So I guess we can go to your number 2 now.
Yeah. So my number 2, I guess I'll just get through this quickly because Brendan apparently does not like this film all that much, which came as a shock to me. But here we are. Number 2, I'm going with The Wild Robot.
It's a good movie. It's actually a great movie.
Brendan doesn't like it. He noted that earlier. He's not a fan of the film. You all heard him, folks. That's what
That's
he said.
true. You know what? That is true, because if I don't have it as one of my 10 favorite animated films of the decade so far, then I must hate it. Because everything's black and white.
Crazy observation to make. At any rate, we can debate that at another time.
Hey, it's a very good movie. I'm going to agree with you on whatever you pick here. I know I am.
I love. So I noted I have seen this film 3 different times. Perhaps that is part of it at this point. I don't really know. It certainly could be life circumstance for us, or perhaps what we respond to, because some of those films you mentioned earlier in the conversation, I don't love them as much as this one. And again, there is a wide gap. For me, this is one of the top 5 animated films of the decade so far, and it's not particularly close. And a lot of it has to do with the unique inventiveness of this film, the sincerity, the charm, the heart of it.
Absolutely.
And very similarly to what I was just talking about with All We Imagine as Light. And surprise, surprise, as someone who responds to score in movies as heavily as I do, but Chris Bowers, his score to this film is unbelievably good.
I don't know if an Oscar is enough. This is the work that deserves like a Pulitzer Prize or something like that.
Yeah, and I guess as a slight rebuttal, I use that very, very loosely, because you noted that Top She's track there at the end of All We Imagine as Light is the best of the year, and it certainly is one of the top 2. But there is a second track that I think is just as good, which is why I struggle to really pick between them. They're just my 1A and 1B, I guess.
Gotcha.
Because the track I Could Use a Boost from Chris Bowers, which acts as the central theme for Bright Bill in this film, it is stunning. It is so breathtaking and beautiful and poignant. And obviously it underscores what is the second, my number 2 here, the scene halfway through the film when Bright Bill has to take off on the migration there with the rest of his peers. And when we talked about this film on the show, I talked about how the film invokes Corretto with how it brings family together, how this film brings family together. It's very Corretto. I also talked about how the experience of watching this reminded me of Damien Chazelle's First Man. And when a film invokes those two, you already have me hooked. It goes to a completely new level when it goes Midnight Special. And boy, does this film go Midnight Special.
Coming from DreamWorks Animation, who would have thought?
Coming from DreamWorks, it is absolutely remarkable when Bright Bill has to learn how to fly. And I guess I want to offer up a little bit of context, right? Because I noted earlier how Nirvana, how that's used in Queer, is a great use of song that is pre-existing. I don't really go to bat for best original songs in films all the time. I think it depends on the utilization of it.
Yeah.
But especially the Oscar ones. The I think underratedly original song in film can honestly be really great. A lot of them are really good, but the ones that are up for Oscars are the ones I'm usually kind of mid on.
Well, they're usually pretty obvious, right?
They're very obvious.
Yeah.
Kiss the Sky, I haven't done the homework, has to be one of my very favorites that's up for that Oscar, and God knows how long. It's been years, maybe a decade. I don't really know, because that's not a category I pay attention to all the time, because I do think what they nominate, again, is often very middling.
It's always Diane Warren again.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to get her an Oscar or 2 or a dozen, who knows. However, Kiss the Sky, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. And the reason I think it works for me is because I responded to it without all of the awards buzz behind it. Like it was completely separate.
Yeah, there's no cloud there to.
There's no cloud there.
Yeah,
yeah, like that whole sequence, which is where that song is introduced. It actually reminded me a lot of Wolfwalkers when that came out. The way
just gonna say running with the wolves all over.
Running with the Wolves. Like I responded to Kiss the Sky in a very, very similar way as Brightwell begins to learn to fly and again, how that song is utilized there. It's a very moving sequence on its own. And immediately following that, you get the day of the migration. And what we see is both hesitation and excitement from Roz. As much as she wants Brightwell to stay, she knows that he needs to go. And what plays out is what turns out to be my number 2 scene of the year, where she helps Brightwell get started on his flight. A great moment. But what follows is what really kills me, where Roz, with every ounce of urgency she can muster, climbs to a high point where she can get one last look at Brightwell before he flies away, possibly forever. And you get this close-up on Roz that is the exact same look that Michael Shannon's Roy character gives to Alton at the end of Midnight Special. It is verbatim. And I was undone. It absolutely slayed me.
We need to get Chris Sanders on the show for you to interview him and ask him if that was an inspiration.
I don't know, but it is incredible how similar the two are, especially when it comes to the idea of loving your kids, doing everything you can for them. But there comes a day where we have to let them go to be who they are meant to be. That is the central nucleus, the central theme of Midnight Special. And it is absolutely the core of this film as well. And I want to also shout out, because Michael Shannon's performance in Midnight Special, I talk about all the time, I think is one of the best performances of that decade, of the 2010s. Here you get a really great vocal performance.
Yeah.
Here from Lupita Nyong'o. But the physical performance is obviously done through animation. And I think that is so striking here. Like the way Roz lights up, in addition to the facial movements, which are limited. I love how the light helps infuse the character with emotion, since she is a robot and there's no mouth. There are eyes and the face does move slightly, but it is limited. She has no mouth. And in lieu of that, they offer up these great pink and neon hues that light up the robot to offer up that emotion. It is incredibly inventive in that regard. And maybe my favorite use of it, because I didn't really need that as much on the close-up, the Midnight Special look, that gave me everything I needed. I think my favorite use of the animation, though, in that specific regard, is right before she leaves to go climb up the mountain. There's a moment where she pauses, like Brightwell flies away and she's looking into the sky. And right before she goes up to the mountainside, again, there's a close-up on Roz. She lights up with these vibrant, colorful pink hues to indicate that she's maybe panicking, that he's leaving. This is for real.
Yeah, it's clever. Very clever.
It's very clever. And there's a hesitancy in her voice. This is where Lupita Nyong'o's performance is just freaking brilliant. Because she brings up some hesitancy in her voice. And as soon as there's that desperation, you hear it in the voice, you see it in the pink hues as the robot lights up. That's when she takes off. It is incredible artistry that absolutely destroyed me. There's nothing short of destroyed me. And then as she climbs up, again, you get that close up as she gets that last look at Brightwell. That is, again, verbatim of Midnight Special. I absolutely love it. I could not say enough good things about this movie, and that moment in particular. I think it is one of the best scenes of this decade so far. And if not for my number one, which is just, I can't believe it exists, which we'll get to, this would be my number one. This would be my number one. So like, I do think that it is one of the best scenes we've seen so far this decade, and why The Wild Robot stands out as one of the best animated films of the decade.
I'm very curious what your number one is now. Maybe we don't have as much crossover as I would have thought, but I will agree with you on The Wild Robot for sure. I love that you brought up the Wolfwalkers comparison there, because I was certainly thinking that in the theater when I saw the film for the first time. But you raise an interesting observation about not just the importance of animation and how that communicates drama and emotion that an actual performance in a live action film can't often do. But it almost makes me wonder, should animation, the process of animation, what the animators do, that's almost like another form of performance in many ways. Like it kind of is. And it's an interesting observation that you made there about the importance of animation and how that translates to performance in an animated film. So I think that's a really interesting observation in a film that apparently I hate now. So I guess I'll
that
own
Brandon
up to
doesn't
that.
like. It's sad that he doesn't like this
contrary
movie
to
anymore,
critical
but-
belief, I hate this movie now.
I can't believe he would just admit that openly like that, but here we are.
This is a very good movie. I'll openly say this now, regardless of where it ranks. It is my favorite animated movie of the year. I think it is absolutely the best animated movie of the year, and I'm glad it was such a hit like it was. And with this scene that you're talking about, the way it concludes like that, you can almost end the movie and you have a great 50-minute film right there.
Sure.
The way that the film is narratively broken up into a tale of two halves, I think it pulls that off really well, which is a very difficult thing to pull off.
I agree. And for all the reasons we talked about, we don't have to get into it, but I do like some of the provocative nature of that back half. And another element as well, since we're kind of talking about the movie, because I watched this for a third time just the other night with some friends of mine who had not seen the film yet. And I believe I brought this up in our conversation. I'm fairly certain that I did. But I do like how the film on its in terms of its approach is a little, I don't know if I want to say darker, but it certainly kind of veers toward early Disney a little bit.
Oh, there's something prickly about this.
There is. Like, it kind of has these little fusions of darker elements, right? Such as, the killing of Brightbird's family at the beginning, or there's another death in the snow sequence, for example. Like, it's not afraid to linger in some wild wilderness realism at times, which, again, you think about how early Disney would do that. That's what I love about that era of Disney. This film rides that line, and my friends noticed that as well and brought it up as a talking point. So I thought it was interesting that they were seeing what I was seeing as well.
Well, and then even our conversation on the film when we reviewed it back when it came out, we talked a lot about how there are these perhaps deliberately hidden ideas on Roz simply existing in this world and how she basically disrupts the flow of nature in a way that many people might say is not a good thing.
That could be problematic. Which is something they brought up as well. So it's
just
something
the
they
idea.
noticed.
The idea of this makeshift family, the Coretta of it all, like you're talking about, the film, I think, does ask the question, is that good or not?
Is it good?
I think that's a very interesting thing. The film has a deep core. It really does.
I agree. I absolutely love that. Absolutely adore that about the film. And to me, at its peak, it is that moment at the midway point, the migration scene, if you will. The midnight special scene, I guess is another way that you could call it.
It's the midnight special scene.
I could not believe how closer related the two are. It is very, very close in a great way. Like I say, that obviously very complimentary. I have no idea if that was on the filmmaker's mind at all. I'd love to ask. I don't know.
I think we need to get Chris Sanders on the phone. We really do. And see if he was thinking about midnight special for that one.
But the coalition of animation and score and performance here is astounding.
How about that? The best Jeff Nichols film of the year did not come from Jeff Nichols.
It came from The Wild Robot. I want to know what he thinks of this film.
I know.
I hope I get a chance to ask him the next time.
Yeah, and I say this as someone that liked The Bike Riders, so it's not a knock on that film.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot as well. All right, here we are, our number one scene of 2024 in film. Brendan, what say you?
All right, do we have crossover here? I'm really, really curious. My pick is so basic. It is so basic. It's the ending of Anora. That is my pick for the best scene of the year.
We have very different scenes. Yes, we did.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I'm kind of surprised this didn't
the
make your top
ending
five.
to Anora, if we were rounding this out to a top 10, is probably my number 6. Yeah, 6, 7,
Okay.
8, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, numbers, they mean nothing. But I
Well,
will
I didn't
say,
really do that exercise, but
Mhm.
looking at my honorable mentions list, I noted queer might be around 7. There's
Yeah.
a scene from Nickel Boys we'll talk about that might be 6. So if I did
Okay.
Nickel Boys, queer, this might be number 8 if we were doing a top 10. Something like that.
Yeah, Nickel Boys was a film I really wanted to try and squeeze into my top 5 as well, but it's kind of one of those films that's not really broken up by quote unquote scenes. Like that's a really difficult one. At least it is for me. Unless you
I
have
agree.
something from it at number 1. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
Nickel
here.
Boys is not at number 1.
Okay.
It's not at number
Okay.
1. Like I said, it's probably number 6, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like 6, queer, then the ending to Nora is
Okay.
probably now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it out loud, that's probably how I'd rank those.
Okay. But yeah, Anora, the ending of Anora specifically, when tasked with this exercise, this was the first one that came to mind. And for the reasons we talked about,
It's really good.
it's really,
so
yeah.
good.
And during our review of the film, we didn't fully praise the film in comparison to Sean Baker's other films, but there's something about this conclusion that is making me like Anora more and more as time goes on, knowing that it crystallizes in this way and creates probably his most subversive film, despite being his most accessible at the same time, because it does function like this quasi-romantic comedy of sorts until it absolutely doesn't. But it does conclude in typical Sean Baker fashion, where it basically just hits you with this emotional sting without much of a conclusion. And I think this one might be his most... I was about to say heartfelt, but I don't think it's really that easy to put a word to it because there is something very devastating about it simultaneously. As we talked about it during that review, we talked a lot about how this final embrace between Annie and Igor is one of compassion and how Annie has a hard time recognizing it as that. It's a new form of compassion that her and her profession just can't really comprehend just yet, given the ignorant perspective of her line of work and the line of work of many people here. The way the film deals with workers in a general sense and how they're at the mercy of the almighty dollar is a very effective notion here that I think comes through without words in the ending here. I love the verbal exchange without actually being a verbal exchange in this final scene. Just the effectiveness of that and the way it lingers on that gesture is why I think it is so effective. I think really is in many ways the defining scene of the year in a thematic way, in a emotional way, just really what cinema can do without the backbone of a script to tell you what it's doing. I think it's really effective.
I completely agree. And honestly, if not for the ending to All We Imagine as Light, this would be the ending of the year for me. Obviously, I went with All We Imagine as Light. However, I do think the ending to Nora is equally as great. Like I said, it would be in a top 10 if this was an exercise in doing a top 10. And that ending, the way it recontextualizes the whole film, I think is incredible. It's one of my favorite Sean Baker sleight of hands that we've seen yet. The framing of the moment especially is fantastic because it's the only time in the film she initiates sex that isn't transactional. At least not financially. There's an argument that there's an emotional transaction, but I don't know if I buy that wholly.
It's used as irony, as we talked about. It's Sean Baker throwing a literal transaction in the film so it doesn't become an actual transaction. Like he's trying to play with how
it's
transactional.
Very subversive, for sure.
Yeah.
And I do love how something that has defined her life in many regards, because obviously it is her career, and it's what led to that final moment there at the end. Suddenly it becomes this vacuum for catharsis. It is a stunning visual. The way she breaks down there, the embrace between her and Igor. It is so moving. And when you dig into what's driving all of that emotion, as you were just talking about, we certainly spent quite amount of time in our review of it as well, if you want to go and hear us talk further about it. But it is phenomenal. It is phenomenal filmmaking. Easily one of the best endings of the year. There's no doubt about it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. I have no idea where you're going with your number one now that I think about it.
I think as soon as I bring it up, you're going to be like, oh yeah.
Okay, let me look. I'm looking at my honorable mentions. Let me see here. My first thought was going to be maybe something from Nickel Boys, but we just talked about how that's a really difficult film to pinpoint individual scenes from, just given the nature of it. Oh wait, are you going with that courtroom scene from Red Rooms?
It is Red Rooms.
Okay,
It's the courtroom scene in Red Rooms. I cannot believe this scene exists. I cannot.
That's a great.
I cannot. It is a stunner. It is a stunner of a moment. In a lot of ways, it's equally harrowing to what we saw last year with Oppenheimer, but the film and its approach is obviously very, very different. But yeah, this is the scene of the year for me. And for context, the film is about Kellyanne and her obsession with this case, this murder trial that's at play. In particular, there's an obsession over one of the victims, the oldest victim. Her name is Camille. And what we find out is that there's some uncertainty around Camille, as there's no video of her death like there was for the other victims. So naturally, there is a lot of curiosity around it. And the film slowly builds tension with Kellyanne's obsessions over Camille, what she was wearing when she died, what may have happened to her. But due to her fanaticism and all of that, her modeling career eventually becomes compromised. And as a result, she decides to act out in this courtroom. As she sits down, everything appears to be normal at first. But soon she begins to change her appearance in what is the most shocking and disturbing moment of the year, where she essentially cosplays as Camille, from the hair to the exact clothes that she was wearing when she died to the braces that we saw on Camille. She mimics Camille's aesthetic exactly, which on its own is harrowing, but it's even more disturbing once Camille's family and everyone in the room sees what she has done. It is very, very jolting. And I think what's compelling about it is, from a storytelling perspective, it's the moment that is the most insightful as it relates to Kellyanne, because it's the only time in the film where she removes her anonymity. She was quietly present at the trial leading up to that moment.
Yeah.
And it's also important to note that in other scenes away from the courtroom, we do learn more about Kellyanne and these oblique references to her extreme interest, which include things like BDSM, for example.
Yeah.
Those things were, for the most part, mutually exclusive until she becomes where we find her at her most vulnerable. That's when she completely lets go of her restraints and creates this stunt that seems to give her some sort of sexual thrill out of it, which is especially sickening when you consider the sound design and how Camille's screams as she's being murdered are interwoven into the score as Kellyanne is being removed from the courtroom. And it really doesn't even stop there, right? Because
you're forgetting
even
the
as
wave.
she's being escorted out, you get the smile. There's that eerie smile from Kellyanne, and the wave to the murderer who is on trial there. It will send shivers up your spine. And if it doesn't, you're dead. You're simply not existing in this world anymore.
The most disturbing scene of the year, for sure. Easily in my top 10 if we were to extend this out. I had a really cool conversation with my parents about this film. Based on my recommendation, they decided to check this out, and they really enjoyed it. But they had a lot of questions. I guess that they were expecting something.
You do have a lot of questions,
yeah. But they were expecting something perhaps a little bit more conventional. And the film does flirt with conventionality a little bit, but it certainly subverts it for the reasons we love. But they certainly had questions about how it concluded, this scene in particular, and what it all meant. So I certainly gave my interpretation on the film about people's obsession with this type of culture nowadays, to the point that someone feels the need to, as you say, cosplay as a murder victim, right? Like, that's basically where we've come to, this obsession.
Which, by the way, we've seen on social media at the end of last year with the whole
It's-
Luigi incident.
It's so
There
gross.
was a
Yeah.
literal look-alike contest of how he looked when he murdered that dude on the street.
Mhm.
Red Rooms has played out in real life. Not
It's-
just months after it came out.
and kind of
Months.
and kind of preceded those things too, like with that specific one you're
Yeah, for
referencing
sure.
there. But yeah, when I had that conversation with my parents and I talked about it in that way, and this was over the phone, it wasn't in person, but they both went silent. Then I heard my dad say in the background, "Wow, that's just gross," and it's like, yeah, and they were kind of stunned at the thematic juice of this movie and what it was going for.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah.
it's so effective. It's one of the best films of the
Yeah.
year.
I mean, Red Rooms isn't by conventional standards a horror film.
Mhm.
However, this courtroom scene, there is nothing that came out in 2024 that was more unnerving than this one. Is
Yeah.
incredibly chilling. And like I said, it will send shivers up your spine if you're indeed alive and you have a
Yeah.
pulse.
Red Rooms and I Saw the TV Glow are two films from 2024 that some people might argue whether they're really horror films or not, but they might be the most horrific films of the year,
Yeah.
regardless
Oh,
if
for
you
sure.
want to
I
classify
agree.
them as horror.
I agree. And I think they're so daunting in its horror
Mhm.
that I particularly resonated with, obviously for very
Yeah.
different reasons. But I saw the TV Glow in my top 5, as I noted earlier in the conversation. And I
Mhm.
have this here at number 1. I truly cannot believe this scene exists the way that it is. And again, some of it is the performance that we get here at its core. It is absolutely phenomenal. Forgive me. I
Why
don't
this
have-
performance is not winning every award is beyond me.
It should be talked about more. I mean, I understand why the film. Well, I understand why the film isn't getting more award stuff because again, it
Mhm.
certainly it tickles that horror funny bone, if you will, and award shows don't typically, not all the time, but typically don't go for it. And it's also an international film, so that is also working against it. But I think
Sure.
Pascal Plante, his direction should be in the conversation. The film itself should certainly be in the conversation, and the actress Juliette Garepi, again, forgive me, I'm butchering that, but holy Lord, what a performance!
One
that
of
she
the
gives
best
in this
villains
film.
we've seen in a long time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely incredible,
An absolutely
this film.
vile
And-
human being.
absolutely vile. And in this moment in particular, again, like the
Mhm.
way she sits down initially as if everything is normal, and we had seen her do that many times pre-leading that moment, and then she begins to put on the hair and like
Yeah.
the wig and the clothes and the way she just transforms into Camille as if what she's doing is perfectly okay, like completely brazen
Mhm.
and doing it in front of everybody, like just putting on this stunt. It's just incredible to watch. And again, going back to Plante's direction, like
Yeah.
the way he incorporates Camille's screams into the sound design, unreal. Absolutely unreal filmmaking. It is truly, truly incredible.
This is such an evil movie, which is like the best
It
thing
is,
I can say about it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so unsettling. It's so unsettling. Yeah. I mean, just the level of Kellyanne, quote unquote, getting off, so to speak, in that moment that begins to crystallize the choices she makes in the film. I can't believe the film went there.
Yeah.
And it did. It did, very much did, and it did it perfectly. It was unbelievable.
What a movie. What a
What a
movie.
movie. So yes, the courtroom scene from Red Rooms is my number 1 scene of the year. That is my top 5. All right. Honorable mentions. What do you got for honorable mentions?
All right. Well, I did mention that your picks for All We Imagine Is Light and Red Rooms would somewhere be in my top 10. In fact, they might be my number 6 and number 7 if I were to really do that exercise. So that's where I think I have them there. As far as a few others here, how about the acronym scene from Rebel Ridge? PACE is another
Yeah,
one I
that's
thought
good.
about there. Also, the phone trick scene from Linklater's Hitman is one I thought about.
Yeah, that one
if-
I thought heavily about for this list too.
Yeah, if I were to pick something from Nickel Boys, I might pick the lunch scene where we see
That's the
that
one I have,
perspective
the
shift.
lunch scene. Yep.
Yeah, as a piece of filmmaking, that's really effective stuff there for sure. There's the final line there, "You're my number one," from How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. Absolutely effective stuff. Really wears it on its sleeve, but I don't care. It moved me. Absolutely moved me. The final match from Challengers, the court hearing scene from Ghostlight, Oswald singing karaoke from A Different Man. Many scenes we can pick from The Substance, but the one that I always really thought about was what I'm dubbing the asses on screen scene midway through, which I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about there. Let's see, what else? The vomiting scene from Love Lies Bleeding, the town meeting scene from Evil Does Not Exist. The dad's quote unquote come back to life from His Three Daughters. Let's see, what else? The rock DJ musical number from Better Man, the opening of the Statue of Liberty in The Brutalist, the opening birth scene in Babes, one of the funniest moments of the year. Really the entire first 30 minutes of Heretic before it falls off a cliff. Let's see what else. Nosferatu, I'll simply say just the visual of Count Orlok's crystallization, I'll simply say, is really effective stuff. So those are just scratching the surface for sure. I'm sure you have a lot more to go over there.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of mine as well. I'll just kind of go through these because it was hard to keep track of which ones you hit and which ones you didn't. But forgive me for some of the redundancy. But yes, the lunch scene from Nickel Boys I have on here as well. In addition to Come As You Are, the ayahuasca scene in Queer, I certainly thought about as well.
Good one.
The match point at the end in Challengers, the ending to Anora. I thought about heavily another scene from All We Imagine As Light. I obviously went with the ending. I love it for the reasons I mentioned, but the rice cooker scene, as brief as it is, also struck me in a significant way. So I thought about that one here as well. The town meeting scene from Evil Does Not Exist, as you mentioned. Nosferatu, the carriage sequence, and the ending sex scenes are the ones that I wanted to note there. I saw the TV glow. If I didn't go with the ending sequence, it would have been that scene on the bleachers about halfway through the film.
Oh, okay.
Stunner there, the conversation they have. The phone scene in Hitman, the childhood flashback and small things like these is one of my favorite moments of performance in the year.
Okay.
Dune Part 2, when he takes on the mantle at the end, I thought of this, that whole action sequence of fighting the big machines I thought was really great. And I'm Still Here when Eunice is at the ice cream parlor is my favorite moment of that film. I thought about heavily here.
Okay.
The mirror scene in The Substance, gotta note that before we get angry emails and letters. And it's great. I do love it.
Absolutely.
I don't say that sarcastically or ironic. The raid scene in The Beast, or the house raid scene, excuse me. The karaoke scene in A Different Man. You get to be him for a couple of hours in Ghostlight. The temple scene in Flow. I think you mentioned the opening to The Brutalist, but I also want to note the moment we get at the end. There's a series of events I won't give away for spoiler reasons because I know a lot of people haven't seen it yet. But there's an upside down cross at play, I'll just say. That whole sequence there. The dinner scene in A Real Pain I thought about here as well. Sing Sing, there's so many in Sing Sing, but I do think of the conversation. I can't recall the characters' names off the cuff here, but the conversation in the prison, this takes place at night where Coleman Domingo's character is having a conversation with his best friend who's like right next to in the cell next to his.
Right Sean San Jose, I think plays Mike. That's who you're thinking of. Yeah.
That conversation I think is really, really good in that one.
Agreed.
In Better Man, this isn't the scene a lot of people are talking about. I went with the big concert sequence at the end because like the way the way it's shot is really great. Yeah. And I kind of like the symbolism of him fighting against himself.
Oh yeah, when it turns into a literal war film for a moment.
It turns into literally
Lord of the Rings. Basically,
well, it's War for the Planet of the Apes is what it is.
Yeah, basically what it is. Yeah. I didn't want to get that literal with it, but you went there, and it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
All coupled with a great song there. Let me entertain you.
Yeah, so good. Trap, the whole concert scene, I love it. People can criticize it all they want. I love it. And the final confrontation with his wife is awesome.
Sure.
Conclave, the scene with Cardinal Benitez at the end, I think is awesome. Love that sequence. The training montage in Monkey Man, I loved. The Rebel Ridge acronym scene you talked about. The bar scene at the end of Quiet Place Day One of my favorite surprises of the year.
Okay.
The phone booth edit and Kneecap, awesome. One of my favorite edits of the year. The reunion scene at the end of My Old Ass is awesome. And then the last one I have on here, again, from another film that Brendan hates, sadly, but it is anxiety relenting to joy, which leads for Riley to go out on this skate at the end of Inside Out 2, is something that I've done in my life. Like
it's a good scene.
I have lived
It's a good scene.
It is really, really great. And then,
I'll give
of
you
course, the entirety of Monte Cristo, again, my friend Brendan hates. So, yeah, so good. No, I just threw that one in at the end.
I know. But either way, I am looking at some of the films I love from this year in this rough letterbox list that I have on private to see if we missed anything. So a few of these may be very spontaneous as we try to make sure we cap this year off accordingly. How about the garage scene from Juror Number 2? Which is a very effective piece
that's
of
a good
acting.
one. I didn't have that written here, but yes, I love that one as well.
Yeah, so that's when they're it's interesting because there are a lot of films that we really liked from this year, but they're not really ones that are about individual scenes, and they're really difficult to pinpoint where an individual scene begins and ends, such as a movie like Janet Planet, for instance, which is so observational.
I would go with the picnic scene there if I had to pick one.
Sure.
But
okay.
I agree with you. To your point, I think you make a great point, though, about how observational it is.
Yeah. We also can't forget Bad Boys Ride or Die, right?
Yes. What a fun movie that was. Yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of that.
Can't forget about our good friend Reggie, right?
Yeah, Reggie, just destroying dudes. Absolutely incredible.
Love it. Absolutely love it. There are a few individual, not really scenes, but individual moments lingering on Daisy Ridley's face, and sometimes I think about dying that I think are very effective. But that's
I agree.
Again, it's another one that's hard to pinpoint individual scenes. Maybe the apartment / house party she goes to as a guest is maybe the one I would think about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I'm trying to think
that's
of what else.
One of my favorite performances of the year.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. A movie I liked more than you for sure, but it's another one of those films I can't really think of scenes from, is Hundreds of Beavers, which I really enjoyed. But there are some sequences there that made me laugh pretty hard. It's just, again, it's so consistent. It's hard to pinpoint where they stop and where they, begin.
Sure.
Trying to think, what else? Are we missing anything?
I want to shout out Cooper Hoffman in Saturday Night in the stairwell.
Oh, when he becomes his dad.
When he becomes his dad. I feel like we have to at least note that. I mean, come on. That's so good.
That's a fair,
the way he just becomes
point.
his dad. Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
Sparked some of my favorite film discourse of the whole year.
Yep. But
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a few others as well.
We didn't really acknowledge A Real Pain. There are at least two scenes from that film we can talk about, whether it be the.
Well, I noted the dinner scene.
Oh, you did note that. Okay,
yeah.
I must have missed that. My bad. So we did note A Real Pain then. What about something from Dee Dee? We haven't really talked much about Dee Dee. Maybe the
there's
scene
some really
with
good
Joan
stuff there.
Like the final moment with Joan Chen where she deserves an Oscar nomination. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's all really, really. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, there's certainly some really good scenes there as well. What else here off the cuff? I don't. We debated the ending, but I do want to note. I think there are some really powerful scenes in the first 2/3 for The Seed of the Sacred Fig. I think that's noteworthy here. Same thing with I couldn't think of a specific moment for The People's Joker, but that's also one of those really fun surprises of the year that I really loved, but it's hard to pinpoint a specific moment. But because there's so much happening, there's so much lore and world building to that film that I think is really clever. but I couldn't pinpoint a specific moment. So that was another one I kind of struggled with in that same regard.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we did pretty
films
good
this year.
I think we did pretty good.
Films. Yeah. And obviously we're missing a ton. I'm sure there is a lot that you wish that we mentioned, so you can let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our picks. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment below. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com as well. All right. As I noted, those are our top 5 scenes of the year. On next week's show, it is the InSession Film Awards. So again, that is split into 2 parts. Part 1 will be all of the categories. There are a bunch of them that you'll be familiar with. There are some unique ones. And then part 2 will be our top 10 movies of the year, AKA Best Picture. Still trying to narrow down what my list is going to look like. I'm very excited to dig into that. And I can't wait for Brendan to hate on all of my picks.
Oh yeah, you have such terrible taste in movies, JD. Why do I even do this show with you?
Monte Cristo number 1, and then The Wild Robot number 2. So we're just gonna make Brendan mad all the way through. And and then I'm gonna have Hundreds of Beavers at the very last.
As long as your list does not include films like Emilia Perez or Argyle or Wolves, I think we'll be in good shape.
I was thinking about putting Wolves at number 3. Maybe I should now, just to continue the trend.
There's too much evidence online of how much you dislike that film, maybe even more than I do.
Yeah, no, that film was garbage.
So
garbage.
bad.
At any rate, 2024 celebrating. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be celebrating film in 2024 on next week's show. So I very much do look forward to getting into that.
Yep.
So stay tuned. And the InSession Film Awards for the staff picks, they'll be out this week, as I noted at the top as well. Stay tuned for Chasing the Golds, not Oscars. Could you imagine if the Oscars happened already?
Oh my goodness.
For the Globes, the Golden Globes reactions to that, and then a new Women in Session out this week as well. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here for this episode?
Oh, I'm looking at my tentative top 10 right now. JD, we always do this. We always try to see how much crossover we're going to have, and now's maybe not the time to try to think about this. Maybe this is something we can do when we get to the actual award show itself, but maybe we can start thinking about this. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the year where we have the lowest amount of crossover. I think it was just that kind of year. I think it was a very different kind of year, which we'll talk about why it was when we get into our overall thoughts on 2024 as a film year. But I'm genuinely curious how much crossover we're going to have. I don't think it's going to be as much as before.
This is just a guess off the cuff here. I think we're only going to cross over on 2 films, looking at my 10. 2. I think we'll share 2, maybe 3, but definitely not more than that. I'd be surprised if it goes beyond 3.
My guess was 3.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be my guess right now.
Okay.
Actually, no. Let me take that back. It might be 4. It could be 4.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, stay tuned.
Well, yeah. There are 2. Actually, there are 3 that I would say they're absolutely. Not even absolutely. I don't want to give ideas or put ideas in your head, but I feel like there are 3 I can almost confidently say I could see these being in your top 10. There's one that's kind of a question mark.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Interesting. Okay. No, I am curious what that is going to look like. Because the 2 that I was thinking of, I know like 99.9%, maybe even 100%, just knowing you. And then the 3rd that I was thinking of, I could see that maybe on the lower end of your list, or like 10 or 11, or like 11 or 12, excuse me, like just outside. Okay. But I don't know, like the way you just kind of recontextualize that makes me think that that my dubious thoughts are irrelevant. And then maybe you do have it higher. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how much we cross over.
I like how we don't share our lists anymore. This is more fun for us.
It is. It is fun. But to Brennan's larger point, I do agree that the year on the whole is different than what it has been the last 4 or 5 years for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is, in a lot of ways, this is closer to the COVID year, just given Hollywood, we'll say vaguely.
Well, yeah, I guess that's certainly fair. There's certainly more films to talk about than the COVID year gave us.
There's much more films, yeah.
But I think given that this is not during a COVID year anymore, that makes 2024 one of the most fascinating films.
It is compelling. I agree.
Yeah. Is it the best? Maybe not. But that kind of makes it one of the better ones, just given the weirdness of the plethora of variety here.
I agree. Some really great stuff. We'll talk more about it next week. It's the InSession Film Awards. We're almost to the end there, folks. It's very, very exciting. Stay tuned for all of that next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. I like 2024. It was a good year.
Became a good year. Yeah, absolutely.